Well, here we are again, and we are reading from none other than our continued book of the Chaplains and Clergy of the Revolution by J.T. Headley. That was what? Published in 1864. And we're on to chapter 12. And Pastor Muhlenburg is a very, very interesting person. And what we'll do is we'll get into this right now because, my goodness, he's known as the Fighting Clergymen. Muhlenberg's birth and education. He goes to England. He settles in Virginia, takes a prominent part in political movements, becomes member of the House of Burgesses, raises a regiment of which he is chosen the colonel, preaches his farewell sermon, orders the drum to beat for the recruits at the church door, marches to Charleston, camps at Valley Forge, fights bravely at Brandywine, at Monmouth, commands the reserve at Stony Point, makes a desperate assault at Yorktown, is made major general, his political career after the war, defense of his course in abandoning his profession, and that being of a minister. So, let's get a little bit more information about this individual. There was a class of clergymen in the Revolution who regarded the struggle so sacred that they felt it to be their duty to fight sometimes as well as pray. They did not, however, consider it necessary to abandon their profession to do so. That duty depended on the emergency of the cause. In a perilous crisis, when one idle arm might turn the scale against the patriots, they had no hesitation in stepping into the ranks and fighting like a common soldier. And that's these pastors. They saw nothing incongruous in this course, and hence seldom conceded to make an apology for it, nor did it interfere with their professional duties, for when the smoke of the battle had cleared away, they were found praying with the wounded who had been struck by their side, or offering thanksgiving in front of the battalions for a victory won. The subject of the following sketch, however, abandoned entirely his profession and became a distinguished military man. John Peter Gabriel Muhlenburg was born in the village of Trapp, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, on the 1st of October, 1746. Educated partly in his country and partly in Europe, he received ordination in 1768 and commenced his labors in western New Jersey. In 1772, he went to London to receive ordination an English bishop that he might take charge of a church in Virginia to which he had been called. Returning to America, he settled at Woodstock and entered on the duties of a country pastor. His ministerial profession, however, did not prevent him from feeling a deep interest in the quarrel between the colonies and the mother country. On the contrary, he took the lead in every measure of hostility to her oppressive act. In 1774, when the people of his country assembled to choose a committee of safety, he was unanimously elected its chairman. He was the head and soul of the opposition in that whole region, and so much did he possess the confidence of the people that they sent him to the House of Burgesses of the state. Ardent, fearless, and patriotic, he became so absorbed in the approaching struggle that when the news of the Battle of Bunker Hill reached him, he resolved at once to throw up his profession and enter the army. Having talked and preached for freedom, to determine now to strike for it, he immediately commenced to organize a Virginia regiment, and laying aside his ministerial character, became its colonel. He took leave of his people in a farewell sermon, which glowed throughout with the most devoted patriotism. At the close, He told them of the resolution he had taken to fight, and if need be, die for his country on the battlefield. It was a strange announcement from the pulpit, but there were few to criticize his abandonment of his profession, for he had breathed his own fervid spirit into his congregation, and the kindling eye and speaking countenance told him that his course had their hearty approval. Said he, in conclusion, quote, listen closely, children. The Bible tells us there is a time for all things, and there is a time to preach and a time to pray, but the time for me to preach has passed away. End quote. Then rising, his voice till it rung like the blast of a trumpet through the church, he exclaimed, quote, and there is a time to fight, and that time has now come. End quote. Closing the service, he stepped into the vestry room, and laying aside his gown, put on his colonel's uniform, and stood before his astonished congregation in full regalements. This sudden apparition, a Virginia colonel in full uniform, walking down the broad aisle in the place where their pastor, took every one by surprise. Turning neither to the right hand nor to the left, he strode sternly to the door and ordered the drum to beat for recruits. The silence that had reigned while this extraordinary scene was passing was suddenly broken by the loud and rapid roll of the drum. The congregation rose simultaneously to their feet, and the men gathered in a mass around their former pastor, scarcely one capable of bearing arms remaining behind. The calm quiet of the Sabbath day was now changed into a scene of bustle and excitement. The drum was kept beating, and those who were not in the church came rushing forward to it to learn what strange event had happened. The sight of the pastor in uniform standing at the door and calling for recruits kindled the most unbounded enthusiasm, and before night nearly 300 men had joined his standard. He immediately marched south and was present with his regiment at the Battle of Charleston. The next year, he was promoted by Congress to the rank of brigadier general and ordered to take charge of all the Continental troops in Virginia. The next May, he joined Washington at Middlebrook, New Jersey, and marched with his brigade to the desolate encampment of Valley Forge. Among the devoted leaders who closed with unflinching resolution and courage around the great chieftain during the trials of this terrible winter, none took a firmer and nobler stand than Muhlenburg. At the Battle of Brandywine, his brigade formed a part of the division of Greene, which at the close of that disastrous day was ordered up from the rear where he had been stationed to cover the retreat. For 3/4 of an hour, these noble troops withstood the onslaught of the entire British army, and then steadily and in good order withdrew. At Germantown, he was in the thickest of the fight, and at Monmouth, on that scorching Sabbath day, led his troops over the burning sands as steadily as if on parade. Known for his coolness, courage, and determined resolution, he was selected by Wayne to command the reserves at the assault on Stormy Point. He was afterwards stationed in Virginia and aided in the operation that finally shut up Cornwallis in Yorktown. His brigade was actively employed during the siege of that place. On one occasion, he led a storming party against the redoubt, and with such desperate and deadly resolution did he carry it through the fire, that not a man returned unwounded. Wow. That means every one of the men that went with him into that charge were wounded. At the close of the war, he was elevated to the rank of Major General. Removing to Pennsylvania, he was made chairman of the Executive Council of the state and afterwards sent to Congress. In 1801, he was elected United States Senator, and in the same year received the appointment of Supervisor of the Internal Revenue of Pennsylvania. The next year, he was made Collector of the Port of Philadelphia, which office he held until his death in October 1807. He was buried close by the village church where he was baptized, and the following true epitaph placed above his grave. Quote, "He was brave in the field, faithful in the cabinet, honorable in all his transactions, and sincere friend and an honest man." End quote. But it is just to the memory of this unflinching patriot to let him be heard in his own defense for his course in abandoning the pulpit for the army. In a letter to his brother Frederick, a clergyman also, who had written to another brother condemning his Peter's course for laying aside the ministerial profession for that of arms, he says, quote, "Thus far I had written when I received Brother Henry's letter from you to him, wherein you make observations on my conduct in the present alarming crisis. You say, as a clergyman, nothing can excuse my conduct. I am a clergyman, it is true, but I am a member of society as well as the poorest layman, and my liberty is as dear to me as to any man. Shall I then sit still and enjoy myself at home when the best blood of the continent is spilling? Heaven forbid it. You make a comparison with Struensee. The comparison is odious. Did he die in defense of his country? Far from it. He suffered for crimes, and his life was justly forfeited to the law. But even if you was on the opposite side of the question, you must allow that in this last step I have acted for the best. You know that from the beginning of these troubles I have been compelled to have a hand in public affairs. I have been chairman to the committee of delegates from this country from the first. Do you think if America should be conquered, I should be safe? Far from it. And would you not sooner fight like a man than die like a dog? I am called by my country to its defense. The cause is just and noble. Were I a bishop, even a Lutheran one, I should obey without hesitation, and so far am I from thinking that I am wrong, I am convinced it is my duty to do so, a duty I owe to my God and to my country." End quote. The same Frederick, notwithstanding his condemnation of his brother 2 or 3 years later, under the pressure of the Revolution, left the church for the state and entered Congress under the federal Constitution. Wow, this is shocking. His brother finally came around to the point that he also left being a minister to become a congressman. This is, children, something that we have, and your parents will have to talk to you, and you who may be watching this have to research it for yourself, is that we have become so much of what I call rooftop Christians that it is important that we understand that we have to raise our eyes, our hearts, our minds, and everything that there is to the living God, and submit every way to all authority under him that is biblically sound. But at the same time, as you study and read the Old Testament, we live in society. We live in humanity. We live in participation within those countries, those nations, those villages, towns, cities, counties, states that we are a part of. We either are born into an area, we move into an area, or in some places, people take and become Americans for the ideas that Mr. Muhlenburg, Pastor Muhlenburg, General Muhlenburg talk about. I think that the churches, the schools no longer teach this, but this heart that he says here, do you think, and this is important, especially for pastors and for religious leaders and those that are the elders, deacons of your church. Here's the question. Here's the question to you. Do you think if America should be conquered, you should be safe? Far from it. And would you not sooner fight like a man than die like a dog? I know. I get in trouble with this all the time. That everybody turns around and says, oh, we should be under persecution. Oh, all these other countries where Christians are under persecution. Well, when I look at the Old Testament and I look at then even what Paul teaches, and even as it comes into the New Testament and then through the Reformation, my grandsons, there is a thing called being a man and being manly. My granddaughters, it is being womanly in respect to what foundationally is true. And for all of you that are watching this, what does it mean to be manly? I said on my Saturday radio program is that, and I wrote it in the promotion for that, is that the churches in America have become co-conspirators with the demise of this country because of moving into and assuming the self-righteousness of the social gospel and that of the ideology of tolerance. Our founders and those that preached during the foundation said that tolerance was tyranny and led absolutely to despotism. You who are church leaders, I'm sorry, but if you don't hear what Muhlenburg had to say, you are a co-conspirator in the demise of this nation. And my grandchildren, it is up to you to rise and be those men and women that will stand first off firm on God's word in its totality, and also stand true as men and women for liberty. Next session, we'll get to chapter 13, and we'll talk about Thomas Allen.